And we're live. Greetings, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our GMOs Revealed webcast. We've had a large volume of people who have been engaged in the episode by episode revealing of what's going on in the world of GMOs, how glyphosate's impacting us, etc. You know, when we created GMOs Revealed a couple of years ago and released it free to the world, we had a lot of blowback, a lot of people saying that that children around the world are going to die because we're spreading all of this fear mongering, that glyphosate has been proven to be safe over and over and over again, and all kinds of other ridiculous rhetoric. And not long ago, as I think many of you probably know, I think in large part we've been vindicated from the trial of that happened where a groundskeeper was suing Monsanto because he had suffered damage, meaning cancer. He had cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, if I remember correctly, and it was a byproduct of of him using Roundup, which is the weed killer, but the active ingredient in there, glyphosate. And as a consequence of being exposed to that, he is now dying from cancer and probably doesn't have that long to live. And his award that was given to him, so Monsanto was found guilty. The award that was given to him was I think $289 million, 250 million of which, I think my number is right, it might be a little bit off, but 250 million of which was punitive, meaning Monsanto lied. They lied about their data. They lied about their science. They lied about their research, that this is a highly, highly toxic substance that's being put into our environment in the billions of pounds per year. It's water soluble. It's going into everything that we are exposed to in our culture, and the consequence of which is that there's some serious byproducts, serious challenges as far as how do we regain our health. So I very much appreciated how you all have come together and been engaged in this current free viewing of GMOs Revealed. And for those of you who have already acquired GMOs Revealed, thank you for doing that. It helps support our activities, our movement, and our activism. So thank you for getting it. And for anybody else who, if you haven't purchased GMOs Revealed, we're thrilled for the people who are seeing it for free. If you want to own it, if you want to help support this work, I think there's buttons below the page here where you can click and you can actually get GMOs Revealed. We had formally scheduled to come on with Dr. Zach Bush, who you've seen in GMOs Revealed. Unfortunately, we had a little bit of a screw up insofar as that I think the time zones we crossed our wires on. So I have for us another star of the show in GMOs Revealed, who's also a dear personal friend of mine and somebody who's saving lives every day because of how he has understood this issue of glyphosate, how it's toxic to the body. And he is a master at the detoxing side of this equation. How do you get this stuff out of your system? How can you heal and recover from it? And he's somebody that in GMOs Revealed, we talk about it to a degree. We're going to talk about that more tonight. And that's Dr. Dan Pompa. So Dan, thanks so much for spending your time with us and pinch hitting here.
Yeah, no, glad to be here. This topic, is one of my favorites. So I think we're going to bring some really needed information for people tonight because despite their best efforts, you're being exposed to this, you and your family. So the question ends up, what can we do about it? And we'll hit that tonight for sure. But also, you might have some new viewers that say, what the heck's the big deal anyway? Let's make sure we hit that.
Yeah, well, so let's start out with this. Is pretty much everybody exposed to this? How do you see it?
Yeah, look, it's estimated that it's in 60% of the rainfall. Okay, wow. So, look, you and I go to Napa a lot, right? And we became more increasingly worried about one of the studies that came out and said that even the organic wines are being exposed to glyphosate. Well, how is that, right? Well, as it turned out, the water, right? You get runoff from one farm to the next in rainfall, and they're finding glyphosate in all the wines. Well, it's true with a lot of foods. Now, food has a little advantage. Wine, you're growing all these vineyards in one small area where most of the vineyards are using the chemical. But food, of course, you can spread out. But still, if it's in 60% of the rainfall, even with your best efforts, you're being exposed. And not to mention the fact that it's hidden in so many products, right? I mean, you wouldn't eat ketchup thinking you're going to be exposed, But of course, you can be exposed in large amounts in the corn syrup that's in ketchup, right? So condiments, I mean, hidden exposures, the rainfall, virtually if you're not eating 100% organic, you're getting exposed. And even when you are, you're getting exposed less. So I'm not making an argument, don't eat organic, quite the opposite. Eat organic, for goodness sakes, more today than ever. However, the problem is you're still getting some exposure with this chemical that we know causes leaky gut, which, folks, all that means is, things are crossing across your gut, proteins undigested going into your bloodstream. That can drive autoimmune, just not feeling well, weight loss resistance, brain fog, all the stuff that seems to be an epidemic today, just from the leaky gut. And then it's affecting your brain directly because it's affecting your gut bacteria, which ultimately has responsibility for how your brain works. So, I mean, this is a nasty problem. And that's why I was, very proud to be a part of GMOs Revealed for that reason.
Well, obviously it's quite maddening. And why was there such a extraordinary application of Roundup, which was basically calibrated to work with these GMO, genetically modified foods, these crops that would be resistant to it? It's like this whole evil scheme comes together. Then it's lied about its safety, and incidentally, there's still very powerful forces that are at play. We are currently are not able to upload our videos onto YouTube or to promote this in varying areas. So even though it's now known that these guys lied, that they're basically felons, that they were fraudulent in their in what they professed as far as the safety and their scientific data and research, they're still trying to not let us talk about it. And that's kind of disturbing. And due to those lies, we were able to I think this is the worst environmental catastrophe of all time. And we're talking about one side of the equation here, meaning we're talking about the toxins that are sprayed on the crops that get into our environment and make their way to you and your families. That's one side of it. Then there's another side that says probably a bad idea to eat foods that have their DNA messed with anyway. I mean, this stuff is genetically altered. It's never really been tested, and there were some tests on humans. There were tests done on rats, and it showed that rats who were eating GMO food as compared to those who weren't were developing all kinds of cancers and tumors. And that was another thing that they squashed that research. So, there's multiple facets of really this whole thing and how it might adversely affect you. And I think in GMOs Revealed, you get to see a pretty good, you get a pretty good look at how deep this rabbit hole goes and how treacherous and what kind of treachery was at play here in putting this stuff into the environment, putting it into humanity. And there's going to be this enormous price to pay as far as, the monetary price of just dealing with all the sickness, but also even more so the spiritual price of people who have to watch their loved ones get sick and suffer with chronic diseases and die. It's a horror show beyond anything I could possibly try to communicate. So Danny, what ideas, first of all, any comments on that? And then secondly, what ideas do you have? What actions can people take to help heal?
Yeah, look, I just some easy talking points, because the people that watch this are the ones that are going to really make a difference and spread the message. So let me just give you some simple talking points for your neighbor, for your loved ones who doubt you, and even to defend your position. And for those of you who are new, maybe you're on the fence, you don't get it, right? Well, look, it's called BT corn. There's two problems here. You have the GMO product. Corn is, mostly GMOs in this country. It's called BT corn. It was literally genetically modified to change you and make this corn basically its own chemical to resist all the bugs, etc. So they genetically modified corn. It's called BT corn to resist pests. Here's the problem. We know that this corn goes into your gut and literally makes you a chemical factory. Yeah, exactly. It talks and communicates with your bacteria, and you literally start producing a chemical The same thing that happens in the plant that makes it resist pests is happening in your gut. Imagine that. So literally you become a pesticide factory in your gut versus BT corn. Okay, simple talking point. Genetically modified grains disrupt your gut bacteria. Not a good idea. Make you produce chemicals in your own gut. Imagine that. Okay, there's another problem, the chemical glyphosate that we talked about, right? Here's a simple talking point. We were just in Mexico. And if you don't believe, how could our government allow something that's so dangerous? Well, guess what? The whole country of Mexico has outlawed this, right? They looked at the evidence. They looked at the facts. And they looked at it not only bad for their people, but bad for their whole ecosystem. It's gone. How come when people go to Italy, they go, I can eat the pizza and I don't get sick. I can eat the pasta and I do get sick, right, Patrick? How many times have you heard that, right? Our friends of ours,
Yes, personally, it doesn't bloat your stomach. You get all this, all these problems. There's a difference.
Yeah, no doubt. So the point is because it's outlawed there, right? It's illegal, to use this chemical there and grow these genetically modified plants. So my point is that, we're in this little population here in the United States, and we have to understand that we are being lied to. The fact is there's other populations in the world that have looked at the evidence and realized that this stuff is poisonous. So, these are just logical talking points that you can bring up to people, and they scratch their head and go, oh yeah, okay. So, just maybe the Monsanto machine has such a stronghold here and such a lobby power that it's just not going to get pushed through, the truth, that is, and we're going to continue to be lied to. So those are just some things. Okay, then you look at some of the scientific data, right? And I interviewed Stephanie Seneff, and she talks about how this chemical in their studies disrupts the bacteria, and it affects certain bacteria that we need to make brain chemicals. It's a pathway called a shikimate pathway that we need to make feel-good chemicals like serotonin and dopamine, those things that make us feel really good. Okay, you make those brain chemicals with certain bacteria in your gut. Oh, it just so happens that glyphosate destroys those bacteria in that pathway. And now our brains are lacking. Oh, so don't worry, we have the solution, and it's in the form of a drug called a psychotropic drug. Drugs that inhibit the uptake of serotonin. So therefore your brain gets a little more, but it starves your gut even more. Oh, that leads to autoimmune problems and more gut problems. But we have answers for that too. We have another long list of medications. Okay, so this is what the literature shows. And Monsanto, when pushed in a court of law, obviously they lose. But the problem is that they keep fighting back because of the billions of dollars lobbying, and they're getting in with drug companies, and it's becoming more and more difficult. The facts are that we are being lied to, we are being poisoned, and this is affecting us and our children, driving the epidemics that we're seeing. Look, you can Google this, folks. If you go on Nancy Swanson and look at the correlation studies with glyphosate when it was introduced and diseases like dementia, Alzheimer's, autism, autoimmune, all of these, and you see the same basically curve that goes up as glyphosate went up, so did the diseases. Just Google it yourself. Maybe coincidence? I don't know. I don't think so. But point is some logical things that you can take out and talk about these things with your friends.
Yeah, so it's multifaceted, isn't it? There's I think the big blocks that are part of this, which is glyphosate, Bt toxin, the things you're describing. There are the some of the metabolic aspects of it that you're describing, as far as how pathways be interrupted and what that might amount to. But then there's all these kind of peripheral ripple effects, that, it starts to get like where dozens of things start stacking up that start to impact you as a result of getting started with this absolute assault in our food supply and in the environment that goes into our water, that go, you look at, Zach talks about Cancer Alley, between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, saying that it's the highest incidence of cancer in the world because of all the glyphosate that, you know, that's water soluble, that washed from the farms into the Mississippi and concentrates down on the bottom. And, you know, you know, there's people dying, man. I mean, it's horrible. Anyway, so, you know, it's pretty rugged. To like, when I think about it, it starts to get me angry and sad all at the same time.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, you know, we want to be here to also have some solutions, you know, that we could talk about. How can you get this stuff out of your system? How can you start to cleanse yourself? How can you start to recover? And I'm going to ask you to talk about some of the, so let's do that next. And incidentally, many of you submitted questions ahead of time. So I have a list over here. I'm looking over a spreadsheet on a list. We'll get to those. So hang in there and we'll get to some of the questions that you actually had in the audience. But in the meantime, Danny, maybe you can talk about, you know, what things can be done to help, you know, recover. But before that, what kind of symptoms? Somebody who's struggling with glyphosate, you know, poisoning, let's call it. You know, it's in their system. It starts all these challenges. You know, and maybe not even just glyphosate, but any GMO related type syndromes. What might they experience symptomatically? Why do they experience that? And then how can they get this out of their system?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a great question, because I think when we look at very common symptoms today, like just general fatigue, you need more and more coffee, right? Disrupted sleep, brain fog, you know, obviously gut related conditions where you're reacting to food, you're not quite sure what's going on. These are all early warning signs. Matter of fact, it's estimated right now that 95% of America has autoimmune. That, folks, means that your own body's immune system is attacking itself. And in most people, it's at a low grade level, but it creates a low grade of inflammation. Therefore, you have all of these bizarre symptoms that, you know, you change your diet, you do these, you're exercising, and you still have them. Well, a lot of that is caused by this gut microbiome issue and this leaky gut. And when these foods, undigested proteins, cross over the gut, it creates this autoimmune reaction, this low-grade upregulation of your immune system that drives these symptoms that are so familiar to so many of us. Look, there's so many pathways. There's a pathway called the cholesterol sulfate pathway, that we need just for our hormones to regulate. It's important in heart disease and so many different conditions. And glyphosate disrupts it. Someone sent me a study just 3 days ago. I thought about it and pulled it up. It says, can glyphosate disrupt our gut microbiome in introduction of sulfate deficiency? So induction of sulfate deficiency, and explain the epidemic of gout and associated diseases around the world? And the answer in this article was yes. Matter of fact, they said that gout really, and these things that are driving it are leading to, they believe, that the epidemic of diabetes and heart disease. And they say we urge that the government regulators reassess the toxicity of glyphosate to humans. That's after they did this study, you know. So I mean, it really is a massive, massive problem. Okay. So, you know, those symptoms that I described, to answer your question, I think are these early warning signs, and then they end up presenting themselves in a diagnosis, and therefore then a medication. I mean, that's this, you know, medical treadmill that we're discussing here. Okay, so I think that at this point, most people are convinced. So then the question becomes, you know, what can we do? Okay, look, detox is something that I've taught a lot on. And I say, look, you know, saunas, coffee enemas, we can talk about all of these things because I think they all have a place. However, one of the things that glyphosate is causing is a downregulation of what our cells are meant to do every day. And that's get rid of toxins. And when these pathways start to get stressed and more stressed and more stressed, what happens is they get worse and worse and worse at getting rid of even the toxins that it produces when it makes its own energy. It's like when you burn wood, you have to have a chimney to get rid of the smoke when you're, you know, heating the room. If you don't, you die. Well, guess what? That's what's happening to our cells. Our cells are losing this ability to get rid of just everyday toxins. And what happens is the detox pathways are lowering and the toxicity in the cells going up. So the point is this: if we're really going to protect ourselves and our family, we have to understand a few key principles to get the cell working again, to protect it, to get it detoxing. So therefore, the unintentional exposures that we're going to get, we're able to deal with. That's the key. And I told you in the beginning that I just wanted to make it, very simple. That I believe there's 3 things detox-wise for the average person, the healthy person trying to stay healthy can do. Number 1 is upregulate cellular glutathione and intracellular glutathione. That doesn't mean you take glutathione, because most of that doesn't get into the cell. And I'm not here to sell any products, but people are going to ask you. And it was a 4th generation product I created called G-Cell, like glutathione in the cell, G-Cell. It's designed to upregulate intracellular glutathione. It's very important. Okay, some things that you can do on your own. N-acetylcysteine is part of that product. You can buy it at Whole Foods. There's 3 amino acids that are needed to make glutathione. That's the one that typically lacks and gets stressed. You could take that. Now G-Cell has that in a lot of others. There's 20-some parts of this glutathione cycle that is really targeted around that product. But hey, N-acetylcysteine, it can be helpful. Lipoic acid is another one you can buy at Whole Foods. That can be helpful. Certain antioxidants can be helpful. And some glutathione, does get absorbed, and that can be helpful. But, I'm a big fan of raising intracellular glutathione, and G-Cell is a product that I created there. Okay, another big thing is a lot of the chemicals are brought to the liver, and they're bound up into bile. Bile is what your liver makes, and it's used to digest fat. So it's dumped into your intestines to break down fat. Very normal. The problem is it holds toxins, and it's called hepatic biliary sludge, meaning liver, bile, toxins. But here's the thing, is it ends up dumping in the gut, but your body's designed to reabsorb the bile. It doesn't want to recreate it. So what it does is it brings the toxins around and around. It's called autointoxication. So we've utilized a binder in the gut and to pull that toxic bile complex out. It works amazing to pull these chemicals out of the body so you don't autointoxicate. Bind, B-I-N-D, is a product. Again, it's probably a 3rd generation product that we created. There's 4 different binders in there. One that binds certain chemicals, heavy metals, and biotoxins. Okay, if you don't have access to that, what can you do? Fiber. Eating a lot of fiber in your diet really makes a difference. Organic psyllium husk. I mean, all of these fibrous foods, blending where you're getting a lot of fiber at once, that helps that complex move through as well. So that's something that everyone can start doing right away, is just, adding a little bit of these soluble and insoluble fibers. Make sure they're organic because they do hold toxins. So increasing your fiber intake, huge thing. But again, this Bind product was created around that very problem. And one more product, and it's my favorite. I've talked a lot about it on the shows because there was a lot of brains that went around it, but it's called Cytodetox. And what it is, it's a vehicle that moves toxins from the cell all the way out of the body. And that one's pretty hard to duplicate because a lot of people are trying different binders, but they're not real binders. So they just kind of create more redistribution. But if you just put those 3 products together, you have a weapon that I believe you and your family need. I don't go anywhere without them. I'm looking at those products right there. There they are. They're sitting right over there. You use them too. But, I think that, we need to equip ourselves with some of these detox products, but it's not about one product. That process, you have to get the cell working. You have to make sure that you don't auto-intoxicate from the gut. So these binders in the gut are really important, but be careful. Charcoals, clay, most of those, we test them, they're contaminated. They have a lot of lead because they're binders. So you have to really be careful with some of the binders. That's why if you're going to do anything, just some organic fibers could be a better solution than buying those binders in the store. So big caution on that. And then a vehicle to move the toxins from the cell out of the body. And that's where the Cytodetox comes in. But, far infrared saunas, I get a lot of questions on that, Patrick. I'm a big fan. It opens up the pathways of the skin. And I think it's very, very good. I think it's a great idea. But in itself, I think you have to go to the cell for real detox. It's important. You need a gut binder. We do all those things with a far infrared sauna if you have one. It's awesome. Coffee enemas. It's great. What do those do? You can Google how to do a coffee enema online, but they push out that biocomplex. My caution is we always do coffee enemas with that Bind product or like I said, something that binds, because when you push that bio out, you bring the toxins with it. So when we do a coffee enema, we take that bind 30 minutes before, and it sits in the gut as a catcher's mitt to pull out that toxic complex. So anyways, there's some tips. We could, obviously, you can ask me some questions, take some questions, but I think this is a really important, and eliminate the sources, folks. Obviously, I already mentioned the importance of eating organic today. Asking what's in your food. That's what my family and I do.
Yeah, I mean, look for organic and look for non-GMO. Also, you have non-GMO still in there.
And by the way, I want to add, the oils are very important, right? Most of your oils, your soybean oils, your corn oils, and they hide them as vegetable oils. There's danger in those. We don't eat. We go to restaurants where they will make sure it's pure olive oil or butter cooked like that.
Yeah, good point, because a lot of that stuff sneaks in, right? So one of the things, one question I would have that I think people would be interested in is, let's say they start like kind of this detox protocol, get the stuff out of their system, they remove the intake of it. How long, and let's say they've had some of the symptoms you described, saying, this sounds like me, I get a little bit of brain fog, I have these other symptoms. How long do you think it would be before they start to feel different or better when they start these types of protocols?
Put it this way. If you haven't developed a more severe condition, I would say, look, you make those changes in a month, you can literally be like, oh my gosh, I feel like a new person. Now, if you have a deeper rooted condition that's been there longer, I would argue even some things are going to feel better, right? The brain fog can lift within a month, even some of those folks. But, the digestive system and the microbiome takes time. It does. It takes time to heal. And there's other strategies. Obviously, I train doctors, around the world, the different multi-therapeutic approach that I use for these more severe conditions. But the average person, you can notice a difference in a month if you make the changes. And I think that'll motivate you.
Great. And it should be motivating. And for some people, even like I've seen even happen faster. I want to get into some of the questions if I can. And if people want to just like follow you, learn more, whatever, can they just go to drpompa.com?
Yeah, DR and then
DRPOMPA, right? Yeah. So DR. I'm sorry, you were talking over each other. DRPOMPA, drpompa.com. So can I throw some questions out, Danny, and see how we might react? So Carol asks, what part does GMOs play in the huge diagnosis of people with diabetes in America?
Well, I just read that one study, right? They're saying this epidemic of gout and how it's leading to diabetes and heart disease. That cholesterol sulfate deficiency being caused by this is linked to diabetes. The leaky gut, it's estimated that literally 80% of diabetes is autoimmune, meaning your body's attacking the receptors to insulin, and therefore it brings it back to what's causing a lot of the bacteria to be disrupted in the gut. So I don't know the percentage that we could say is linked to glyphosate, but it's a lot higher than we think. Listen, the epidemic of diabetes, it's not so simple. The more you learn that it's just being caused by, overeating carbohydrates. That's not good. The overeating of sugar and carbohydrates, no doubt a player. However, one of the things that I've learned working with so many of these cases and training doctors is it's more of a toxic issue than we even thought.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Agreed. It's there's definitely a role in the interplay there. Ted Ingold asks this: questions I have are, when was the series recorded and what has been happening with our food since? Is there more or less or similar risks when seeds are modified via radiation or chemistry? So 2 questions. So the series was recorded over a period of a few years. We released it for the first time about a year and a half ago. So as far as what's been happening since, is there more or less or similar risks? Even though it's been in the media and starting to get discovered, I think the risk has actually been escalating since then. How do you see it, Dan?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because it's more enrooted in our environment. So therefore, even the best of us are being exposed, right? So therefore, just that alone puts us greater risk. One comment there, and I kind of heard a question in a question. I think we have to be a little careful because I think the public makes arguments, and smart people make this argument that, well, look, this broccoli is GMO. This is not the way it was. This is GMO. No, that's hybridization, which you can hit a seed with radiation. And I think that was the question. And that's a hybridization process. Some people argue that there can be even issues with that, right? But let me make it clear that is not genetically modification, right? Where we're taking one gene and splicing it in and literally changing the genome, right? So that's what GMO is. That's changing species. That's completely different. It's changing the very function and attribute of the plant. Okay, hybridization alters it with radiation to the point and other techniques. And so there's a big difference of hybridizing things and genetically modifying things. And from a danger standpoint, there's a big difference.
Yeah, and I think I'd rather have neither. I don't want radiated seed. I definitely don't want GMO seed. And of course, it's one thing is the actual food product itself. The other one is how what's sprayed on it. When it's cultivated. So anyway, so I think that answers that question.
We made that clear, right? We talked about the BT corn, where it's genetically modified literally to produce its own pesticide, and then it literally starts affecting our bacteria. But they're also genetically modified to take more of the chemical, and really the experiment really has failed, frankly. Because obviously they have to use more and more of the chemical, and we're literally what this stuff does is it pulls certain minerals out of the soil and out of the plant, and therefore kills weeds. It works, but the problem is it's pulling certain minerals out. So we're creating long-term massive problems with the nutrition of food as well. And by the way, glyphosate, it really is an antibiotic. I mean, that's how it works in us. That's basically how it's working in the soil. And it's doing that by pulling minerals out. Very dangerous long term.
Yeah, and what we've seen now is that as they're reviewing, they say, wow, they see an increase in crop yield in the beginning, but then because of how they destroyed the soil and the microbiome of the soil, the yields start to reduce. So the whole point was, hey, we can get much bigger yield by using this technology. But now in the end, you got very toxic stuff and no increased yield. It's just the whole thing collapses.
Look, everyone talks about different vitamin deficiencies, and I say, really today it's easy to get vitamins, but there's 5 that are really hard, and glyphosate plays a role here. Iodine is which we need to make thyroid hormone. We see thyroid conditions is a massive epidemic. I mean, my gosh, the amount of people that have a thyroid condition over 30 today, it's striking. I mean, it's unbelievable. Glyphosate's playing a role here. It's unbelievable. But iodine deficiency, right? Magnesium is being chelated out. Arguably, this is a glyphosate issue. B12, okay, that's indirectly a glyphosate issue because a lot of that is because of what's happening in the gut. That's where you absorb and make the B12. With intrinsic factor, vitamin K2, right? Well, people aren't eating grass-fed anything today, so that plays a role with the K2. So we're looking at these vitamin deficiencies. The major deficiencies are mostly being caused because at least the escalation of this by glyphosate.
Well, and getting back to kind of what I was alluding to with the ripple effects earlier, is you start to decrease magnesium, you have these symptoms and problems, and sometimes that's pretty painful. You start to take painkillers, which a side effect is constipation. So when you lack magnesium, you start having painkillers. It leads to all these other downstream things, and then you start taking other drugs to try to take care of that situation. And that's why too many people are trying to say, well, they're trying to pin a 1-to-1 cause to effect scenario here, which is not the right way to look at it or to understand it. And when you get into clinical trials, if you're doing randomized blinded, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials, trying to say, does this cause this? The answer is yes. You can see some direct correlation, and they're not doing prospective trials to look at this. They're looking retrospectively to try to understand it. However, you have to understand, sometimes you're looking at a condition that's very downstream from this original cause, and they're not even thinking in terms of glyphosate, soil, how this stuff came out. They're looking at way downstream effects that they're not even correlating these two things together. And so
this is a good one, man. To your point, though, vitamin D deficiency is some of Stephanie Seneff. She's the senior scientist at MIT that I mentioned earlier. This sulfate deficiency that causes a cholesterol sulfate deficiency is linked to the vitamin D deficiency. And by the way, that was the 5th vitamin that I didn't tell you about that most people are being deficient in. So people are taking vitamin D, even getting in the sun, and yet they're wondering why they can't get their vitamin D levels up. Well, studies are showing that this glyphosate issue is causing the vitamin D deficiency. Now, to your point, that leads, vitamin D is a hormone. It's a pro-hormone. So now that leads to all of these other downstream problems that vitamin D, of course, osteoporosis, but, other immune problems and, heart disease. I can keep going down the list of conditions, all because this can block sulfate and cholesterol sulfate and affect these pathways indirectly. And that's to your point that, how do we even get people to understand some of that?
Yeah, it's when you're on the evil side of this, it's very easy to confuse people and try to act like you're doing nothing wrong. But the reality is, you can look at a root cause, the underlying fundamentals, and then it plays out, and we're all different. So every human being has a different reaction to these things. But there is a reaction. Some people detox much more efficiently and effectively than other people. So there's, and where do you live? Again, how much are you out in the sun? How much vitamin D you're getting naturally? What are these things destroying? Are you maybe getting magnesium where other people aren't? So all these things interplay to create these outcomes. But the bottom line is, it's a stress and a challenge to everybody. And we have to be vigilant, pay attention, and get back to just the fundamentals. Get this stuff out of your system by detoxing, and start putting in stuff that contains little to none of these toxic things. Here's another question. Are there certain items one ought to get levels checked in blood, like mercury or magnesium? What would you, so if somebody said, I want to go out and get a blood test and see what's going on, you're an expert on this, Dan, so what would you suggest?
Yeah, there's different tests that are looking for glyphosate now. The problem is we've done some of them. Glyphosate, it's elusive. It can be in tissue and it's in and out of the body. So unless you're really, testing while you're getting the exposure, you could easily miss it. So look, I don't know that that's necessary, because we know that we're all being exposed, right? So, I think you just realize that you avoid your exposures. And I think everybody has to do some form of detox, protect their detox pathways. I think you have to educate yourself for your family's sake on this. I really do. We do, people that have very high heavy metal levels that we measure by doing a heavy metal challenge, that blocks your detox pathways. And therefore, then you start backing up every chemical that you're processed to. So those people test higher in glyphosate, not because they're getting exposed more, but because their detox pathways are so shut down. That's an important test. Are you getting mold exposure? Mold is so nasty of a biotoxin that it shuts down detox pathways. So I think that you can evaluate yourself, for some of those tests. And on my website, I talk a lot about all of those subjects. Obviously, we can't, bring life to it. But, I think it's really important. Exposures in your mouth from, of course, silver fillings contain mercury, root canals, hidden infections in the mouth. It crushes your detox pathways. It crushes your microbiome. And now all of these other chemicals that we're exposed to become a problem. So I think you have to really look at your whole exposure. And some of that may require some testing, and then evaluate how you're not getting rid of other toxins like glyphosate.
Thank you. And thanks for that question. And I'm just going to try to get, we got time for maybe a couple more here. Ellen asked kind of a related question, Dan. I don't know if it's a quick answer, yes or no, or if you know something or not, but is there a glyphosate test you recommend for testing well water?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you go, doctors' data is doing some really good tests, and you can, I think it's like $50, but you send them your sample. Now, there are certain states. I would check with your state and even county because they oftentimes will run tests for you for free, and they will test for pesticides. So check there first because oftentimes that's free. But otherwise, doctor's data I know is doing some of that testing as well.
All right, Ellen, thanks for that question. Judith Di Gregorio, nice Irish name. Yeah, Pompa and Gentempo can relate to that one. So
yeah, absolutely.
Here's Judith's question. He says, how can one protect themselves internally or on a cellular level, even if you do everything possible to avoid GMOs, like eat organic, eat well, et cetera? And there's a few questions that are like that. Judy Robertson has a very similar question to that. So I think you spoke to this a little bit, Dan, but I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I would add one more thing. The methylation conversation comes up a lot. I said how important it is to protect your cells, and glutathione is that G cell product I was talking about. Methylation parallels glutathione. Stress of any type, physical, chemical, or emotional, depletes this methylation, and that's a problem because when methylation goes down, so does glutathione. Methylation is needed for a lot of the cellular detox, and other stressors deplete it. There's a principle that a Dr. Vininsky taught some years ago called the methylation priority principle, and I agree with him on this, that the body's so smart that it will take these methyl groups and utilize them for survival first, meaning even to activate cortisol and adrenaline, which is a stress response for any type of stress. It needs these methyl groups to turn that on and even turn them off. And that's why some people are left with a lot of anxiety because they lack these methyl groups that stressors are depleting. Physical, chemical, or emotional will deplete them. Here's the bigger issue. Once they get depleted, your body's prioritizing the methyl groups to stay alive. But now toxic hormones like toxic estrogen metabolites will build up because your body needs those methyl groups to get rid of them. So you develop cancer because your body's trying to survive in this stress mode because it's so stressed physically, chemically, and emotionally. So methyl support today, I think, is another topic that I would say I would add to that list. There's a product that I use in my family. It's sitting over there. It's called MORS, M-O-R-S. And there's 21 steps to this methylation cycle. So you can't just take B12 or folate and really protect that whole cycle because it will stress another area. So it's really important that you support that whole methylation cycle. And, I don't take the product every day because I protect myself, but I randomly take it probably 3 or 4 times a week. When I'm traveling, I take it every day, but that's another tip that I would give.
Great tip. Thank you. Yeah. And really important, deep subject that we could do a whole other webcast on, actually. So there's several similar type questions. So I'm just trying to pill some out that are in their own category. And this might be the last one or one more. Charles Eng asks, and I'm not really an expert here, but you might know something, Dan, maybe not. In episode 10, you discussed bee colony collapse, and very good for watching episode 10. We just released that, I think, on Monday. It's the bonus episode. Where you discussed bee colony collapse due to nicotinoid contaminated corn fructose syrup, and also the difficulty of controlling where bees get their pollen to make honey. Are there any studies to determine how much organic or non-organic honey have this issue with pesticide? What is the safe brand? So I'll just say this. I'm personally not aware of studies. They may exist. I'm just not aware of them. And what I do is I find in local markets, I can find local organic honey, which is what I just get. I want it. It's really good if you can get it from your local environment, and if it's organic, that's I buy big jugs of it.
Yeah, no, same. So we do the same thing. Yeah, and I agree. I don't really know the studies on that either, but it's a big deal. However, to the point.
Thank you. Maybe a quick one. So Zania, well, she asked, and we already answered this. What are some of the what do you use to take glyphosate out of the body so it doesn't build up? So I think we've already spoken to that. PT asked, Where can I find non-GMO seeds to buy? Can I be certain all organic seeds are also non-GMO in terms of GE? If not, how can I tell what the non-GE seed? I'm sorry because I'm having time reading seed while shopping. Also, what fertilizers you recommend, in the garden, etc. So he's looking. Can I find something like Restore for gardens? Very actually, yeah, that's a great question. So Dan, what do you know about that, if anything?
Actually, people utilize Restore in their garden, by the way. Yeah, so true. Yeah, I mean, look, I think, true organic fertilizers are getting more and more popular, right? I mean, in the simple, how did we do it in the old, right? I mean, the best thing you can do is create your own compost. Honestly, it's not hard to do, especially if you have a family. Your compost is your best fertilizer, especially because you're eating now all organic. So your compost is all organic. And I think the other part of the question was the seed. If it's organic, 100% organic, then the seed is going to be safe.
Yeah, I agree with that. So Julie asks, how long does it take to start feeling improvements from removing GMOs from your diet? So we talked about that. You said, average maybe about a month, some faster, some slower, depending how bad it is. So here's an interesting one, and this is from Nancy, and so maybe there's one or two more here. Why do poultry continue to be okay when eating GMO grains year after year? Wild turkey and birds, as well as domestic, eat the GMO feed and do not appear to have any problems with continued existence. First of all, I don't think they're okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know that they are.
Yeah, so I think the premise starts out they're not okay. And remember, these they don't live very long. These birds, that especially the big manufactured poultry, there's very short lifespan. So it's not like they have a lot of time to age and to see what happens to their bodies. They're accelerating their growth. They're killed. They're put on they're put into the stores and then onto your plate. You want free range. You want organic. Otherwise, I feel like you're taking a sick animal that's fed toxic stuff and you're putting that into your body or your family's body. I mean, just start with the logic of it. It can't be right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, our good friend Joe Mercola, he won't even touch chicken, right? I mean, even the ones that claim to be organic, because I mean, he feels chicken flesh now is so toxic, right? And he has a good point, right? So chicken is a very, very toxic meat. Therefore, you're right. They don't live very long. So we are eating a bird that is not healthy and therefore not healthy for us most often. Now, if you know your farmer, if you know your chicken, if they're truly free range, eating bugs, etc., different story, but it's rarely the case.
So I have to take this one more question because it's one that's near and dear to our heart, Dr. Pompa. Are there any affordable non-GMO red wines available in the Birmingham, Alabama area?
Hey, there actually, trust me, there are. Now, listen, I can assure you, Patrick knows more about wine than I do. However, Patrick and I both love wine and have wine in common. Yeah, so I mean, we're actually
sharing it together.
Yeah, well, I mean, in 2 months, I don't know, 2 months, we're going to be heading to Napa together, and we're going to be, enjoying some of these dry farm, meaning non-irrigated, organic wines. So I think it's becoming more popular, even in obviously Napa. However, listen, we'll give you a tip, right? Patrick and I love Italian wines because there's a reason, right? And I could say Spain and France too. It's illegal to spray and it's illegal to utilize chemicals on the wine. They follow a process. They dry farm. You're not allowed to irrigate, so you're not getting the chemical runoff. So when we go out, and by the way, some of these Italian wines, they're the cheapest wines. My daughter, who's 22 years old, she finds $10 bottle of organic wines in grocery stores. I was like, and they're always Italian or Spanish wines. So it is possible. I don't know the brands. I'd have to ask my daughter.
Yeah. So just a couple of comments on this. And incidentally, you're going to see, stay on our GMOs Revealed list, because when we find stuff, we'll be putting out like, information and sometimes even offers saying, hey, here's a wine that we like or a product that we think is good, what have you. And we put it in front of you. Sometimes things you'll think are applicable to you, sometimes not. But wine is something that we're definitely looking deeper into. Actually, we are in a Wine Revealed docuseries right now. Yeah. It's going to take a while to, it's a pretty big subject, so it's going to take a while to complete it. But here's what I found out. In general, I almost can't drink. I have a wine cellar. I'm a collector, and I cannot. And going back to, like, I have old wines from the 80s and early 90s. Those are okay. But current releases of, and I'm so sad to say this because I'm an expert in Napa wine in general, and I very, very few of them I can drink anymore. I literally will wake up at 3 o'clock with a headache. I'll know right away. Holy, there's all kinds of crap in this wine. And they'll use accelerants and all the kinds of additives where they manipulate the wines in varying ways. Plus, the farming practices with fertilizers, GMOs, et cetera, can be an issue. The GMOs, but what they're spraying on the crops. So anyway, however, there are some hand-picked, as Dr. Pompa just said, dry farmed wines in Napa. I'm going to be out sampling them, Dr. Pompa and I together, coming up here in a couple of months. And we'll report back and let you know what we found and how we, because you got to have two things as far as I'm concerned: good quality, I want to enjoy it, and clean. But our go-to now are the old world wines: France, Italy, Spain. We just discovered some spectacular Slovenian wines. Really good price points, very clean the way that they're farmed. We actually were on the ground in Slovenia with the farmers. We'll tell you more about those, in the future. But anyway, bottom line is, I feel great after having those wines from the old world. It's hit and miss when you're in the new world because of all the stuff they do to the wine.
I think for the person who lives maybe where she lives, going, yeah, well, I can't even get those wines. Let's give a plug to Todd White, his company Dry Farm Wines. Yeah. He ships most places except Utah. Anyways, there's a couple others. But anyways,
and I plan on getting Todd for an interview to bring him on, at some point.
Yeah, I mean, he goes around to these places that Patrick and I are talking about, and he finds the best ones, and he's got a good palate. And anyways, average bottle cost, I think, is about $30 for his wines, and they ship right to your door. So Dry Farm Wines is a great source, and yeah, you should interview Todd. He's great.
So anyway, I think that's a great note to kind of tie it up. Thank you, everybody who submitted questions. We got so many questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to them all, but really great stuff. But we're going to have more webcasts, so just stay tuned. We'll have month by month, you'll see we have more webcasts, more guests, more questions that you could submit, and we'll keep this community and this conversation going. In the end, number one, I just want to say thank you so much to Dr. Dan Pompa. He's away in a very beautiful place, and he could be with his beautiful wife doing some fun things. But when I hit him up and said, hey, can you jump on with me? He was like, I'm in, because this is how committed he is to the mission. Again, listen, his products are downstairs on my counter right now. drpompa.com. You can, all kinds of content information there. Go check that out. And I have to say, folks, that this is something that's very important. We are being censored. Google, Facebook, YouTube, they're all starting to basically talk about how they're cracking down on what they think is, fake news and unscientific information being promulgated. And all I can tell you is that we validated everything. You look at the cast of people we interviewed and the level of expertise and credentials they had in GMOs Revealed. Why would people want to eliminate our First Amendment right to spread this message and let people look and make a choice? What are they afraid of? And they're afraid of the truth. That's what they're afraid of. So we have to rely on you, our good friends, ladies and gentlemen, to share this message, to let people know about GMOs Revealed, let people know the truth about what's going on here, and have them basically help to save themselves and their families from this tragic, toxic thing that's going on in the world. So, Dan, thanks so much for not only being here, but for the level of commitment, of uncommon commitment you have to really helping people all over the world who desperately need help in these realms right now.
I love it. I love being here. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here with us on this webcast live. It will be posted here for, I think, a week or so. So, the page that you're looking right now, you can copy that link and you can send it to everybody. They can come back and watch this webcast. It's free. We're happy to get this information out. So thanks very much, everybody. We appreciate you. And for the whole GMOs Revealed team, thanks for all your work in getting this put together and set up. We appreciate that. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.